Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's special edition of Beyond the Ordinary Show. And today we have the amazing, beautifully heart-expanded man of Matt Kahn on the show today. And what a special treat. You laugh, but it's the admiration that so many people have for you because of what you embody and what you convey through that embodiment. It's really a gift for so many, and to have the opportunity to sit and laugh with you and just talk about life, personal life and aspirations is wonderful. And for me, it provides such a scope of what's available in the world where some people may not think that there may be a lot available, that there's only certain trajectories that we can focus on. But that's not the life that you're living. And so I love it if you share more about that, because again, we started the call, we started sharing, life's good, these things are happening. What's happening in the world is the word you used was hilarious, but not in the ha-ha type of meaning. And I guess really my question for you is like, how do we live in a world and how do you navigate this prosperity, this abundance, this wisdom that you embody and share with other people? And what happens to your consciousness where other things are focused that don't seem as positive?
It's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing I would say would be that I'm never unaware of the fact that what I do as a spiritual teacher or a healer is a privilege, meaning I have the privilege to speak to you right now. I have the privilege of serving this audience right now. Beyond the Ordinary, I have the privilege of being someone who is recognized and someone who has touched the lives of millions of people, and that's a privilege. And so every moment of my work, which is my life's work, is an act of service, and I never forget that. And so for me, the more the awakenings have expanded, the more they've embodied, the more wisdom I become aware of, the deeper my experiences go, which even after all these years, my experiences are still amplifying and deepening on a daily basis. In fact, there's really no space from the expansion, which is what they call unraveling samadhi. It's a meditative state. But for me, being connected to the universe is a privilege. It's an honor, and it's a complete joy to be of service to humanity. And so really for me, it's until I take my last breath, I'm in service to the world. And I find that grounding, I find it humbling, and it allows me to see any type of recognition or fame that I have acquired to be both a reflection of the work I've done and the responsibility I have to use that power to help inspire others. So I think because I'm incredibly aware of that, and to the degree that every conversation I have with any human being, whether I'm at Starbucks or I'm at the grocery store or I'm helping someone on a live call, every conversation I have, I'm dialoguing with the divine, I'm serving the divine. And there's never a moment where that's not completely in my awareness. And so again, for that, I'm so humbled to do this work. I'm more grateful today than even the first day I started doing all this. And to answer your second question about how to balance this, the world we live in, right? The world is going through the ascension, where the world is going through a realization of 5D, and yet going through the corridor out of 3D through 4D to 5D, it's obviously a precarious one. And we're seeing that a lot of percentages of the world have to go through a lot of experiences to get to this place of connection. How do I live in the world? And this is an interesting answer. I don't live in the world. And I'll tell you why. Because I did this teaching at a retreat recently, and I said, the world is a word. And that if you really think about what the world is, like if you ask people, what is the world? They would say it's a planet, it's the place we all meet, and everyone's going to have their different ideas and concepts. But if we start to think from a very simple place, if we think from the most obvious level of awareness. The world, right? All we hear is the sound of a word. And when we take the word world out of the equation, the question becomes, how do you live? So I live the same way, whether prosperity is flowing and I'm fortunate to live the life that I live. I live the same whether I was in a zombie apocalypse, and I live the same as the world is in whatever state it's in, no matter who's in the White House or whatever is happening. I live the same. And I think it's because my understanding of the world is that it's a word, and that who's in front of me is who I'm serving. And if there's something in a different part of the world I need to serve, people tell me about it, and then I work on it energetically or I send blessings. But I think that the reason it's hard for a lot of people is because they're trying to figure out, how do I become the most preferable concept living in a concept called the world? You're not a concept, I'm not a concept, but the world is a concept. And when we stop living as concepts, we start living in reality. And the greatest help I can do anyone is to be in reality. And so I don't have a world to cope with. I am now a newly married man. I have a stepdaughter. So I have a family. So I do think of different things from a different perspective in terms of like just, being a dad now kind of. But we don't live in I don't live in a world. I live in reality. I live in the light of divinity. I serve everyone as the divine. And I see that whether it's a victim or a predator, everyone's crying out for help because everyone's trying to cry out to return to the divine. And so for me, it's a life of service, but I don't cope with the world. I praise reality.
That's beautiful, Matt. And that takes me down into a relationship, really an intimacy that you do have with divinity. And divinity isn't something that's projected as a higher consciousness that we're trying to reach to necessarily. Right. Even though, of course, intrinsically, we were striving towards more of that luminosity because we're curious. There's that pull for it. But you're seeing and you're being and you're relating to the divine in everything that you're encountering. And by being able to carry that, it shifts the perspective from having to do something to earn something into being with the beingness of what is.
Right. Well, I think the most incredible thing about this whole journey is when you get to a place where you no longer have to tell yourself how to think, how to see, or how to feel, or I should have done this, I should have done that. When it's one thing to turn inward and to observe yourself. And then there's this certain level where you stop watching yourself and you start being yourself. And for me, as I was hearing you talk, we're talking about it's not above you, it's obviously within you. And we all know that, but I think what's interesting is, why is it that some people perceive the divine above them and not within them? And I think the truth is that first you become aware of the divine, and how did I say it the other day? I said this really interesting statement. I said, your vibration is the reputation you build by the choices you make.
Nice.
So when you are building a reputation of high vibrational energy, it means that your choices are surrendered to which of these options embodies my highest ethics and values. And so when you are a person who has given the greatest space in your life as like a gift back to the divine, like the divine gave me this reality, and of course I'm one with the divine, and the gift I've given back to the divine is I've given myself back to the divine. And so this body is used to say, what is the highest choice I can make ethically and in my highest integrity to bring more of the divine into the world, right? There's not the struggle in me of like, well, this is what I should do, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I don't have that anymore. And at a certain point, none of us will, because we all are working through addictive patterns of what we do to cope with life while still feeling separate from the divine. And once you are one with the divine, choices are there to bring more of the divine into your body and more into your life. And so I could say that I serve the divine within myself and within all human beings, because in my body is a history and a continual history of choices where I am making choices deliberately to anchor my highest ethics and values, knowing that what I'm doing for myself is also like this game of follow the leader, where people energetically are going to be following the example that we so powerfully lead. So I think when the divine is above you, it's because you're becoming aware of the divine, but you're not letting the divine speak or act through your choices. And when you have surrendered enough of yourself to the divine you've become aware of, you just become this space where this reputation is built, this high vibration reputation from the kind of choices we make. And at a certain point, it's not a sacrifice. You're not missing out. In fact, the sacrifice is how unfulfilling life would be if I acted from a lesser level of integrity. And then your point of attraction and your resonance changes. So instead of like, okay, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, it's why would I choose anything less than the highest integrity? And so we're all in this process of being seduced by the remembrance of our own divinity. And as we're properly seduced, the ability to make choices from our highest ethics becomes a joy instead of a hardship. But that for me is like really a description of like what's really happening on the journey. We're doing the inner work, we're loving ourselves. All this stuff is still true. But what's the grid of this journey? The grid is like, what's the work we're really doing? Like every day, are you spending your day inside your own head, or are you also looking at your choices and go, okay, that's my study time. Here's the pop quiz. And are we really kind of bringing these two things together? And that for me is what I find is most exciting about the journey.
And you're talking about alignment. And again, when you talk about integrity, it's not a moralistic integrity. It's knowing thyself, really,
Yes.
in ways that that we can reflect to ourselves from that, again, that intimate, that really sacred space. And it's what we wish from other circumstances in our outside world to be reflected back to us.
Right.
And we're constantly searching for that validation, but there it is. It's
Well,
right.
I live a life where I'm under the impression that I'm the only one in the world that has to be of integrity. Everyone's in their own reality, everyone's their own timeline. And just as an example of this, so obviously, I'm newly married. And for those that say congratulations, I really appreciate it. My wife and I are both teachers. We met at a conference on St. Patrick's Day a year ago. We got married on the year anniversary of the day we met. So before we met, and I was at a point in my life where I said, look, if I never meet the love of my life, I live a great life. I'm fine. I got to a place of like, I don't need this thing that I've needed my whole life. Like I've been looking for my wife since I was 14 years old. You're hanging out with your 14-year-old buddies and they're like, who's your favorite celebrity? And I'm like, who are we going to marry? And like, so, but I've been obsessed with this since I was 14. And so I got to a place where I'm like, I'm tired of this obsession and it's either going to happen or it isn't. But what I decided was, I had a realization of, if I'm going to really step into my marriage with my wife, what if I started the relationship with my wife before I even met her? So I would describe the way I live my life. And actually what's hilarious is that she did the same thing in her life and didn't know, obviously. We were both doing it simultaneously. And I decided to be what I call a single married man, which means I'm in a monogamous relationship with my wife who hasn't materialized into form. And if I meet a young lady and there's energy between us, but I don't feel in my heart that this could be that this could be like possibly the love of my life, I wouldn't even go on a first date. I wouldn't even engage it beyond a friendship, because then I would be treating this person in a role that belongs to my wife, which isn't fair to her. It's not fair to me or my wife. And so I lived a life where I was faithful to my wife in marriage before I even knew who she was. And the moment my actual wife and I actually met, we locked eyes, our energy fields clicked into place, and we were both astonished at, it wasn't just love at first sight, it was instant multidimensional connection at first sight. And she had been living as a married single woman. I had been living as a married single man. And it wasn't like we met each other's criteria and said, oh, well, this is good. This would work out. It was literally just, you're the one I've been waiting for. And so I knew that. And I also know energetically that if I met a woman who didn't carry the vibration of my wife, frequency wise, wouldn't even matter. Wouldn't matter the resume, wouldn't matter any of that. And so I think, like, just from an ethical standpoint, because I as a teacher, I emphasize so much of the importance on ethical integrity and how that creates an alignment with spirit. I do believe they're completely connected. There are many paths, but that's how I've been taught by the universe. And so I gave so much of my choices to being in a relationship with my wife. And I became more discerning than ever before. And then the moment we both met, we both knew it. And I think that's an example of just when we're going to step fully into our relationship with the divine, even if it's in partnership, how much of ourselves are we willing to really give to really step into the highest, fullest experience? And I think that's where spirituality kind of contradicts the way the society has been running. That, society is all about beg, borrow, steal, and figure out a way to make it work. And even if you have to step on some people, our world calls that ambition. But when you really understand, there's a much longer road. In the beginning, it will seem like there's very little payoff. And it's because we're working out of our system this need for instant gratification. And we're really proving to ourselves that we're really in this journey. My wife was really in the journey. I was in the journey. And then when we met, the gift was the journey we had prepared for. And so I think that, it's easy to look at spiritual enlightenment, liberation, emotional freedom. All these things are wonderful. And I want to, everyone's destined to have all of it. But how much of ourselves are we really going to give in order to allow the highest journey to unfold? And I think that's a much deeper conversation. And it's a wiser one, and it's certainly a worthwhile one.
It's definitely worthwhile. I was a little confused about your marriage, but hold on. You just got married on St. Patrick's Day?
Yes, like Sunday. We just got married Sunday.
Freaking congratulations. I had my timelines wrong. Oh my God. Would you be open to receiving a blessing here now with the audience?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Y'all, if you all are open to joining me in this blessing, if you just drop in, take a deep breath, and if you want to close your eyes, and I invite you to the happiest memory you have had in your life, and let that light up in your heart. The birth of a child, a wedding, being with a loved one, being at Disney World, whatever it is, a baby laughing, conjure it in your heart. Allow the wave of that joy, that Amrita, to rise up through you. And as you're holding that in your heart, if we can all in unison, as you find it, send a wave of blessings and joy, and a spark of your divinity in witnessing of Matt's and Joy's marriage to one another in their union. May we bless them with that much light and so much more. Thank you all.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. And thank you. Yeah, we just got married Sunday, and it was an incredible, very small, intimate gathering, and it was exactly what we wanted it to be. And hilarious how it didn't necessarily go as planned on the day of the wedding, and we had to pivot, and it was a living, breathing teaching in our wedding, which we were both laughing at. The funniest part too was when the officiant said, "Now, Matt, repeat after me," and everyone laughed. I got to finally do a repeat after me, and it was the best one ever. So it was great. I mean, we're both very happy. We've
Oh
been
my,
married since the day we met, so we're very happy. But there's so many people out there that want to find their soulmate, and I think part of the issue is you live like a single person, and so you date around, and then you think, when I meet that person, I'm gonna step into a relationship. But if you step into the relationship first, instead, then the person whose energy you can have that commitment to can actually come to you. So I think that is an example of so many levels of spiritual alignment. And for both my wife and I, we've given our lives completely over to this path, given our hearts and our lives completely over to the divine. And there's nothing, thankfully, in alignment, there's nothing that brings us joy and fulfillment that's less than the highest integrity. And we it just feels so good once you finally get into that place. And if I think if people knew, hey, when you are, and everyone always says, when I arrive, when I heal, when I awaken, I do all these things, then I'm going to be blah, blah, blah. The truth is, when you heal and do all those things, you come to a fork in the road, and the divine says, will you hand yourself back over to that which created you? And will you live in complete alignment to allow this light to move through you? So the healing and awakening is just preparing you to hand yourself back over to the divine. And at that point, once you heal and awaken to such a degree, the only threat to your ego is all the things you used to do that used to bring you joy, that were kind of debaucherous and pattern wise. By the way, you won't want to do that anymore. And it will freak part of you out. Like, how do I not like this anymore? What do I do for fun? And it's a whole, it's, you have to get to know yourself all over again. But I think if people knew that, like, when you arrive, you then get to hand yourself back to the divine, and it's such a beautiful life, and it's so worthwhile. But um, I think it's worth emphasizing so that we all know where we're headed.
I think that's really the indication of a true master. When the master reaches that mastery point, realizing that they really don't know anything, and giving it all up again, and just it's starting all over in that humility.
That's
But
right.
awareness of discernment of what's built along the way, but reducing yourselves again to a new beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's funny. It's funny how when I was a kid, my mom demonstrated this teaching without even knowing it. Matthew, when you get a gift, take it back. I'm just kidding. But it's kind of funny when you realize that you have been given the gift of life, give it back. And that's when liberation can be known and fathomed and tasted and felt. And that's when the divine becomes a reality, where you're not telling yourself what to think. You're not trying to keep yourself in a certain stance. You're not doing performative spirituality, which we all have to go through that stage. Totally have to go through that stage. But at a certain point, it is an embodiment. And once you taste it, you will realize everything you need to realize. You'll see it all. And it's so funny how an embodiment, being a human being, is so much more enjoyable, and life starts to make a lot more sense, even though right now it's on purpose that life right now doesn't make a large amount of sense on the surface. So, there we have it.
it doesn't make a lot of sense, and we'll get into it in a little bit. I really want
Yeah.
to just though, Matt, this place that you're in, again, we talked about it before we went live, and I've had my version of experience of it, where we're feeling more grounded.
Yeah.
And grounded, and there's like an anchoring that's taking place. And for me, the anchoring is part of like connecting the upper to the lower, if you will. That balance that just streams through, and you can anchor it into the earth, and you can take it up to what we would call the cosmic divinity, in the source, or whatever you want to label it. But in that groundedness, as much as you're spiritually evolved and are grown and are aware and receiving information, and again, they're having this beautiful relationship with that intelligence, that there's even more coming in, that there's an even more profound connection that's like that you're being wowed by
Mm,
what you're being received and probably humbled in the process simultaneously.
absolutely. I call every day of my life, and it's a part of a teaching, in Buddhism, they call it beginner's mind, but every day of my life is day one. So however many days that my life will be, I've had those many different versions of day one. So if I had a 30-day experience, I would have 30 different versions of day one. So I just turned 47. So I have 47 years of experience in day one. Or like when I meditate, for example, which I don't do religiously, I just do whenever my body needs to rest. When I meditate, my meditation practice is literally one perfect breath. And I take the most perfect breath I can take. And then the next breath, I try to make it even more perfect in whatever way that is. Just the most mindful, aware breath. So my meditation practice is only one breath performed in consecutive order. So I'm only taking one breath. And then the next one, I'm only taking one breath. And that's all I do for a long period of time. So for me, every day is day one. Meditation is one breath done to the greatest level of commitment and perfection. And what I've noticed is that when you're taking a journey, you only get lost when you move out of the beginning. When you move out of the beginning, you're going towards the end. And once you're going towards the end, then you get lost. Where am I going? Am I doing it right? And you're attached to the end. And really being attached to the end means you've lost sight of the beginning. And if you always stay in the beginning, especially law of attraction, no matter how, the real law of attraction is you are attracting things to you versus having to be the one that chases after things. So I stay in the beginning. I let everything come to me. Everything's always day one, and everything is only one breath at a time. And that's how I live my life. And every day I get to have a greater commitment to that. Every day I get to have a greater revelation of that. So it keeps it very grounded, keeps it very humble. And I find that for many people I've worked with, they're lost when they have strayed away from the beginning because they're seduced by this thing called the end. The end is never in sight. The end is a fantasy. The beginning is always what's here. So you learn to trust in what's reliable, the beginning. And if you just stay in the beginning of everything, that's when everything transforms the most radically, which is, again, another cosmic joke in the whole thing. But if you just stay in the beginning, stay in the one breath, stay in day one. Like when I go to the gym, every day is day one. That for me is where the clarity is. And that's also where the responsibility to my words and actions always are naturally in awareness.
That's beautiful, Matt.
Thank you.
And again, staying in the beginning, again, what I spoke about earlier, connecting
Yeah.
up, connecting down the vertical,
Yeah.
and the intentionality in the relationship with that and the presence with it is so powerful. How do you create your vertical or the horizontal from the vertical? So again, we're connected. It's okay, I know that I have this impulse to go to the gym or write this book or be on this thing. How does it ripple out vertically in what you're creating and what you aspire to?
Yeah, it's just known to me. Like for example, oh, my wife and I are going to write our first book together, and we're both like, okay, we're getting married. We just got married Sunday. Why don't we do the outline and we'll start writing it in 2 weeks? And so as soon as I say that, and she resonates with it, we've both been briefed, we've both been informed that this is what's going to happen. And then of course, everything could change, but typically for us, when we're told things, it happens very directly. So
Right.
it's kind of like we're on a need to know basis. And when we are becoming aware of what it's funny how it does that. Hey, when we're being told what we need to know, but it's not time to know the details, that's when we usually start looking for things. Like, for example, if it was time to buy a new car and we were like, hey, should we buy a new car? And then we start looking for a car. Looking for a car is never going to be the time you're meant to buy a car. It's just getting you ready to receive the car you've already purchased in the future. So for us, we understand that when we start resonating with things, it's life's way of saying, plan for this to happen. And then we we both are intuitive. So we both kind of feel into the field and go, oh, we're going to look for a car this weekend. We're probably going to buy it within the next week and a half. And sure enough, it happens in a very precise way. So and every day we wake up, my wife and I both, our lives are incredibly planned with events, interviews. So our lives are pretty busy and we have to plan things out in advance, but everything for us is honestly just a very precise level of intuition. Like on the weekend, it's kind of like, hey, what do you want to do? And we kind of just go for it, and it comes to us through that kind of a lens. But everything for us is really, we're pretty aware of how our year is going to unfold a year before it happens. As we go along, we still kind of tune in to feel like, is that still what's happening? But everything in our lives, honestly, just drops in so precisely, and it really allows us to be a part of our lives, but we don't have to overthink or micromanage our lives. And I think it's interesting because we live such miraculous lives, and it's far less work. And at the same time, we're so present as human beings with our life. Like, we have a house, and I'm now a stepdad, and there's laundry, and I cook for my family most of the time, and I cook us 3 meals a day from scratch. Like, I'm incredibly proficient in the kitchen. And so I live in this meditative state, but so I have this connection you talked about, but I can get up and go in the kitchen and make an entire meal from scratch. And I think that's also part of the mastery is some people, when they get into this vertical connection, they get so expanded, it's hard to function. And then when they're going to go into horizontal land, right, they're doing, but then they got to come home and be and recharge. We both have both at the same time. So I could literally transmit with you energetically, lead a retreat. In fact, I led a retreat 2 years ago during the pandemic or whenever that was. And I led it virtually, and we had a lunch break, and I was transmitting some intense awakening energy. I was so blasted open, and we had a lunch break, and I literally got up, went in my kitchen, and cooked myself one of the best meals ever. And to be able to shift from this kind of energy to this kind of energy is so difficult to learn how to do. But once you learn how to do that, your life is so organized. Your life is so precise. Like, for example, I don't experience time, but I'm never late. And I've had friends that go, I don't experience time, and we don't know where the hell they are. Right? We had lunch plans. They still, maybe they're there right now. But I think that's kind of a fallacy of like, if I'm not aware of time, then I'm just impulsive or I'm late. We don't live in time, my wife and I, and we are never late because our horizontal and vertical, as you put it, is so aligned. And it's just, after a while, things just get so precise, and it's such a functional way of living, and I remember when I was developing this, and there were times where I could remember using this a little bit many years ago, where if I didn't want to go somewhere, I'd be like, oh, I'm integrated or I'm healing. And I was still using that a little bit. And then when things got to where they are, then I saw like, oh, you become functional so you can actually then represent the highest level of truth within you. So I think there's just a lot of things we're all working out. But again, at a certain point, being connected to the divine doesn't make you space out, and it allows you to be just as functional as a human being, and never less connected. And again, that's where we're all going. That's what's already within us. We're just kind of in this mastery program.
Yeah, in that nexus point, into the center of those crosshairs of the vertical and horizontal, it becomes increasingly difficult to deny the divine and the flow of the divine. It's like, it's so synchronistic, it's so precise, like you said, which is so spot on. So I so appreciate that. What would you say to people who are like, okay, I can connect this way, but I've got all these other things. I've got health concerns, I've got financial concerns, relationship concerns. I'm concerned about what's happening on the other side of the world. It's like, I don't know how to balance that in a place where I can center in the way that you're talking about.
Well, I think that the problem is that people can't, okay, so the need to center comes after something I don't know how to do. I don't know how to balance all these things. One of the cosmic rules of thumb is if I don't know how to do something, I'm currently in a moment where I don't need to do that. So for example, right now, I don't know how to properly swing a golf club. I don't. And right now, I'm not in the need to do that. I don't know how to slam dunk a basketball. I'm not in a place where I need to do that right now. Thank God this isn't, thank God this interview isn't based on a basketball game. So everything that a human being doesn't know how to do is in a moment they don't need to do it. And a lot of us in our egos go, oh, I'm going to need to do this somewhere in the future, so I need to do it right now. And if I don't know how to do it right now, I fear that it's either never going to get done or it's not going to happen. Instead of just trusting, I acknowledge things need to get done. Everything gets done in the moment it's meant to happen. At the moment it's meant to happen is when I will have access to what I need for that thing. Now, if we need to take smaller steps to get to that reality, then we start to plan a little bit. Okay, what are the steps I need to take to accomplish this goal? Can I break it up and do one of these steps a day, a couple steps a week? And we can really kind of organize our time a little bit. But I think there's this kind of pressure of I need to know it all now, and I need to have the ability to do it all now, or else I think I'm screwed. And when we come into the awareness of the divine, every day you're meant to do a certain amount of things. You're never going to do more than you're supposed to. So can I say, I accept that I am going to accomplish this goal perfectly as the divine intended me to do? Please, divinity, bring me the inspiration, the focus, and the time management to get it done on the highest timeline available. And then we start looking at, what do I need to do? How do I organize my time? Because most people get too overwhelmed with what they don't know how to do. And that's when they start procrastinating. That's when they start putting it off. That's when they start using spirituality as an excuse to avoid. Oh, I could do that first step today, but I'm integrating and I'm obviously going through a light body activation. And clearly the universe has given me 10 new chakras and I've got to stay home and do nothing again. You know what I mean? And so it's like we're ditching the pressure that we put on ourselves instead of just saying, okay, the divine and I are going to do this together. What is in my power to do right now? Can I take the first step towards this goal? If not, what do I need to do to get to that first step? And can I kind of map it out a little bit so that every step is digestible and doable? And I'm actually working to show myself and prove to myself that I can do it instead of being my own worst enemy and proving to myself why I have a right to be overwhelmed. And then that just takes us into our self-soothing coping mechanisms where we avoid stepping into life. So how can I be my greatest ally and prove to myself that I'm capable of doing anything? And what small steps can I break my goals into? Every day I'm excited to achieve and prove what I'm capable of doing instead of trying to do it all at once. I think it's really important.
It's really important. Is there any ways that you would suggest that would help us get out of the loop of the patterns that would have us go into the escaping what it is to really become more empowered and action oriented in the steps that we know are beneficial for us, but
sure,
other things, it's like, I don't know, I don't have energy, I'm too tired, I don't have enough money, I've got to do this, and this instead. And it's like, it's always the delay that's occurring, and it's habitual. It's like we don't even know we're doing. So how do we get aware enough, and what can we build up as the practice to assist us to form those new neural pathways, those new action taking abilities?
Well, I think we just really have to lean on both the feminine and masculine energies within all of us. So the feminine is the grace. The feminine says, Let me make a plan of action to where every day each step is attainable and doable. I'm not going to do it all in one day, and let me break it in small pieces so I feel I'm guided by the grace of life. But I'm not going to lean so far into the feminine that I'm just soothing myself out of action. And in the masculine, I'm also going to be aware of the fact that every step in a new direction is going to be different. It's going to feel inconvenient. It's going to be uncomfortable. And it may not feel the way I think it's going to feel every moment. Like people under the impression that if I'm following the flow, it's always going to feel blissful and ecstatic. And the minute people bump up against something that doesn't feel blissful and ecstatic, they go, maybe that's the divine telling me to do something else. No, that's just, that's not really the divine. That's the divine saying, here we are. You're about to change. You're about to change something that has been stuck in you for a long time. And that's not always comfortable. So the masculine knows it doesn't have to be comfortable in order to be attainable. And the feminine knows I can break it up into smaller pieces to allow the highest amount of grace and ease to carry me through. It doesn't have to be comfortable. So for my background, I used to be a personal trainer many years ago as a bodybuilder. And I was competing in bodybuilding. And when I went to bodybuilding, and I'd never played sports in my life, and bodybuilding was just what my body, for some reason, started excelling at. And I didn't realize I could build muscle very quickly. When I got into bodybuilding, I started to realize that I'm moving in a direction that's contrary to my conditioning. My conditioning says pull away from pain. And in bodybuilding, you're moving towards pain, not to harm yourself, but to break down the tissue of muscle so it can rebuild bigger. And I learned to move towards pain and have a different relationship with it. And so in my life, making choices, healing, I don't move away from pain. I actually move into pain. I don't look for pain. I'm not gratified by pain, but I have a very good relationship with pain. So if I do something and it starts to feel painful, I start to feel like, oh, thanks for telling me how worthwhile this is. Where for most people, pain will be like, oh, I shouldn't go here. But only our most limited self is thinking that. So I'm thinking from the perspective of this is breaking down a limitation in me. And this is showing me how viscerally I'm growing by going in this direction. So I think really the deeper answer is, are we willing to change our relationship with pain? It's not going to be a pain that lasts forever. But when pain doesn't turn you away from a choice, and when pain actually shows you, oh, this is going to be a direct amount of growth in the shortest amount of time versus intensity. I could grow with no pain, and the slowness of it will be excruciating. I can grow directly, and the pain might be respectable. Which one are we willing to take? And even when it's painful, can we just slow it down, but not pull from the pain, but move through the pain? Like when I teach people to love themselves, it's love yourself through pain, not love yourself away from pain. And that's a whole different conversation.
Oh yeah, it's so beautiful. I want to take some live calls, Matt. So
Please.
if y'all want to ask some questions, raise your hand. We'll promote you to panelist. And before we, and that's very Navy SEALs Jedi of you, and I agree with you completely. Yeah. It's a beautiful relationship that we get to repattern, and there's a motivation that comes from it. But again, the relationship from being in presence, it's so powerful. It's a connection that I want to ask you this next question before we take live calls.
Yeah.
This grounded state that you are in, and that access that seems to be expanding.
Yeah.
What are you connecting to in those states? Who, what? What's your awareness of it?
I would have said years ago, I'm a channel for the Galactic Council, which is true. And I work with Melchizedek, who's my main guide. But I will tell you something I've never said publicly, or maybe I'll say it in a different way. So I went through a series of awakenings many years ago, about 18 years ago, and I still go through awakenings virtually every day. I mean, the space between awakenings actually is what disappears. And so then at a certain point, there's nothing but awakening, right? The ever being, ever becoming. of the universe within a person. And so I had these awakenings to where I became aware of the higher realms, the Galactic Council, the higher realms of, you know, Shambhala and archangels and all these things. And I started communicating with these beings. And then I had this experience where the Ascended Masters pulled off their masks and underneath was me. And I realized that the Ascended Masters are archetypes of my higher self and all these things. But then I went through a mind-blowing awakening, and I can't tell you when it was because I forgot. But I went through an awakening to where even the spiritual reality that a lot of people experience in plant medicine, the spiritual reality that had been activated in me, all vanished, all completely vanished. And what happened was I used to have these memories of past lives. And then as it all vanished, I had this different experience of, I had all those past lives, but that actually became like a movie I was in. And now I'm in a different movie where this is actually my first life, which is actually what it means to be born again, which is an initiation into Christed consciousness, not a religious thing, not a Christian thing, but the teachings of Mary and Jesus from the Egyptian mystery schools, where you are born again, where literally all your past lives are wiped away and you are here as if for the first and only time. And so I will tell you, my experience of all the higher dimensional stuff is gone. I still talk to my guide Melchizedek. It is both a higher divine being as well as myself, but so much of what I've experienced has been embodied. And I so much of that spiritual reality has come and gone to where it all kind of moves through me and into the heart of a person I'm working with. It all moves through me into the audience right now. But when I said earlier, the world is a word, so is spirituality. And what I have found is that religion is man's way of trying to understand spirituality, and spirituality is man's best attempt to glimpse reality. Once you get to reality, that's the higher spiritual plane, reality. And reality is both everyday life with no resistance and no, you know, it's everyday life, but it is where spirit and person have come so close together that at a certain point, spirituality, and this is the weirdest thing, John, spirituality will sound like you're at some Comic-Con convention. Like I'm at the Star Wars convention and we're debating, you know, was Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader really related, or whatever the hell we're talking about? Who has the most chakras or who has the most archangels? At a certain point, all of this stuff will completely vanish. And what will remain will be everything you learned about spirituality, you will know as yourself. And as long as people know, right? Like spirituality is great. I mean, I love teaching this and I love being who I am, but spirituality is like the tailgate party you have in the parking lot of Disneyland. And if you're in the parking lot of Disneyland, you look around, you see rides, you think you're at Disneyland, but then you go through the gates and it's a whole different thing. And you've got to let go of the parking lot to get through the gate. And it's amazing that there are people that have experiences of different levels of reality and people who don't have the experience and go, oh, I need to have that experience. It's all going to vanish. But what isn't going to vanish is you knowing yourself as that which you've been seeking. And that's the biggest surprise out of this whole journey, is when it all vanishes and you are what remains. And that's why people have spiritual egos to work through, because the spiritual ego needs this higher world to judge itself with or to compare itself. Am I aligned? Am I not aligned? Am I this? And all of that gone. Like, I remember, just a quick story before we take a caller. I remember watching a Qigong class on PBS. This is before I knew I knew what was happening. I could talk about it. And I'm standing up in my living room going, okay, we're doing Qigong. Because I had no idea what it was. Let's try this. And they said, okay, close your eyes. Look within and see your energy. John, I looked within, nothing was there. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm broken. There's no energy inside of me. Where are the chi balls? Where's the chakras? And it was gone. Even the idea that I'm in the present moment is an idea compared to something called the past or the future. That goes too. That doesn't even exist, because if there's nothing but the present moment, how do you know when it is? It just is. And so there's nothing else but that. And so it's like a conversation you stop having with yourself. It's like it's like I had an imaginary friend when I was a kid, because I didn't have them, and then at a certain point it goes. And so for all of us, there's a level of revelation on this path where you can't get too attached to the way things are, because once you reach certain levels, it changes dramatically. One level, you remember your past lives. Next level, that was a fantasy. One level, you're talking to an archangel on a spaceship. I've done that. Then the next level, that disappears. As long as you know that everything is only the way it is for a moment, and just it's always going to change, that's when we start to realize that the real essence of spirituality is how you're willing to embody all of this. And that's what's so important right now. And that's what's going to help us survive the world we're in. Stay in the beginning, stay in the one breath, and all of this will start making sense, right? All of a sudden you'll go, of course there's darkness in the world, because darkness only exists in a world that's not self-actualized, and the world still needs darkness to step into its light. If everyone in the world were to be fully in its light, darkness wouldn't exist, because it exists to wake up the light in other people. So you start, and I'm not saying that makes everything okay. And of course, I'm a part of helping to bring in this light, but we're bringing in a light not to oppose the darkness. We're bringing in the light to say, it's time for darkness to have nothing else to teach us. And let's accelerate timelines in the name of love. But again, I will tell you that if people were to step into my body, they'd be astonished how little is happening. I'm still a channel. I'm still transmitting. I'm still funny. I'm doing all these things, but like, there is like, it's not like a spiritual Disneyland inside of me. It's like a dark cave where nothing happens. And it feels amazing, but it's so astonishing how simple my life has become. It truly is.
Oh, it's, and I'm imagining walking into the cave in that Disneyland and and not being in a place where I have the perspective that you're sharing. I mean, going, well, this is a boring life. I'm going to go to another ride because there's nothing going on here. And that's the most peaceful ride you can be on.
It's like you go to Disneyland, right? And you think enlightenment are these rides, like, oh, enlightenment is Matterhorn and space. My wife and I just went to Disneyland. All these cool rides. No, enlightenment is the bench. And you have to ride the rides for 36 hours for how many days? And then all of a sudden your feet are killing you and you go, I think I need the bench. That's what enlightenment is. Enlightenment is the bench at Disneyland. And no one sits at no one at 7 a.m. runs when they first open it. Oh God, get out of my way. I need the bench. But at a certain point, the bench is amazing. And all the shit you got to do at Disneyland is just building up the value of the bench. So Disneyland is the spiritual journey and the bench is enlightenment. And people are laughing because they feel what I'm saying.
They're laughing.
I hang out at the bench.
But Matt, on my bench, when I am present enough to sit on that bench,
right,
my capacity to see and feel beauty,
right,
the awe of what's created in that amusement park, it's another stage of awe. You're witnessing divinity recreating itself all over again, and you realize that you have a front row seat to it.
100%. In fact, when I was a kid and I became aware of God, which was the first word I learned about it, I was raised Jewish, and was put in Sunday school and promised a bar mitzvah, and it was horrifying. Didn't have a good experience, but I learned by God, and I was like, became aware of there was something called God. And I thought, and I said to myself, I want a front row seat to witness God's miracles in action. That's what I want my entire life to be. I said that when I was like 11.
Wow.
And what do I get to do for a living? I have a front row seat to witnessing the miracles of divinity in action. That's what I wanted. That's what I received. And as I keep evolving, because there are people that will see me in interviews, or I do 2 calls a month in my membership. And every time people see me, they go, God, it's like you're different. I am, because I am going through such a trajectory from one interview to the next, one day, one breath to the next. I'm always in a different place. And what I notice for myself is at a certain point of revelation and expansion, the journey then becomes, how can you embody this in the utmost simplicity? And so at a certain point, you build the spiritual ego. You're the knower, you're the this, you got all the words, you can tell people all the words, you can be around people that know less, and you will be the brightest light in that room, and that's great. But at a certain point, the next stage of it is life goes, okay, you've created this knower. Now the universe is going to become a big eraser and erase you. And you erase yourself out of form. You erase yourself out of attachment. And you become this person who, if you can sense energy and you see me, and I get recognized a lot on the street, I go to the grocery store and take pictures and stuff. It's kind of fun. But if you don't know who I am, I'm just a nice, funny guy. If you can't sense energy, I'm just some guy. And there are people that will meet me and go, you're so normal, because your spirituality gets so tucked in, it gets so erased. You don't reek of awakening, right? In the very beginning, when we first come out, if you come out of your first plant medicine ceremony, you come out of your first meditation retreat or whatever it is, and you are just like, you have this look, right? And you are reeking of spirituality. You are just like, and then you, how come everyone thinks this is weird? Well, because we act weird, you know? But at a certain point, we learn to tuck it in, and we learn to be well adjusted. And the greatest mastery is you can embody your vibration, not say a single spiritual word. And through your actions, you will inspire people to care more, to listen deeper, and to be more empathetic without having to have this conversation. It's just by demonstration. And it's just, you know, politeness. That's been my greatest spiritual practice since I was a kid, as I realized trying to make people like me is a long game, and being polite felt better in my body. And I learned how good it felt to be polite. And it was my only spiritual practice is being polite. I love it. To this day, it still feels great. And even if someone is not nice to me, which doesn't happen that often, my response is polite. And it blows people's minds. And I'm not doing it to blow their minds. It's just, that's my journey, is if you're in my presence, you're the next person to receive my blessing of politeness. And if you're not nice, I am. And that's okay, because no one has to be nice. This is just my journey. I don't need anyone to be any specific way, because they're the way they need to be. I'm the way that I am. And it's so freeing, and it allows you to connect with the soul of any person without needing to have this conversation. Like I used to need to have this conversation. And then I got tired of hearing myself speak. I got tired of saying the same things. And I got tired of believing that people need to talk about this stuff in order to be deep. Like we think, oh, it's not a deep conversation unless it's spiritual. And the truth is, a lot of us don't know how to actually connect without processing something. And the people in our families who are not spiritual are giving us a break from processing something. And they're trying to help us practice, have a conversation with nothing to process. They have things to process. They can make time for that. We need a break from it. So it's all really perfect. But once you start to see it, once you sit on the bench for a little bit, right, and you chill out at Disneyland, buy yourself a churro or something, all of a sudden, reality. And it's the greatest spiritual experience I've ever known, to be honest. and being embodied and being so less in a process, honestly, like it's the greatest gift.
The gift, yeah, what a gift. Are y'all feeling the possibility for you as Matt's describing this about himself, of what's alive for us as well? Not only our access, but the naturalness of it, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, let's get into some Q&A since I promised it, and I'm keeping Matt, or I'm running a little bit long. Well, let's go to Q&A. Let's go to user 497. I apologize if we don't have names popped up here, but welcome to the call.
Thank you so much, John. I appreciate it so much. Matt, this is the deepest pleasure in local time. I've been a fan of yours, and every time you speak, it makes me cry.
Oh, thank you.
So this is great.
Yeah.
I had written a question down because I knew I was gonna like not have anything to say, but it just seems so small in light of everything. Anyway,
Okay.
So I have past lives where I've protected portals and information from getting into the wrong hands, and
Yeah.
also past lives of persecution from being a mystic, and so in this life that there's a call for information dissemination, but I can't get past all that past.
Right.
What do
Well,
you say
so
to
if
that?
so if you can't get past the past, is that the right is that the right intention for you in this lifetime? Meaning, like, try these words out loud. You all know I do repeat after me. You all know I do this. So try that. Oh God. Wow, that was a fun noise outside my house. Try, my nervous system still works. Try this out loud really quick. What if what I think I need to do,
What if what I think I need to do,
I really don't need to do?
I really don't need to do?
And what if this is a chance to wake up out of my spiritual ego?
And what if this is a chance for me to wake up out of my spiritual ego?
What if the right information in the wrong hands
What if the right information in the wrong hands
is only a doomsday scenario
is only a doomsday scenario
for the wrong hands that have the right information?
for the wrong hands that have the right information?
Like the wrong person holding the Holy Grail
Like the wrong person holding the Holy Grail
that is turned into a pillar of salt.
that is turning into a pillar of salt.
Or like the secret people in this world
Or like the secret people in this world
who've hidden all the deep texts from the world.
who have hidden all of the deep texts from the world.
And all they did was build underground bunkers.
All they did was build underground bunkers.
Didn't seem to give them much power.
Didn't seem to give them much power.
So what if this lifetime is different?
So what if this lifetime is different?
And what if I wasn't the rescuer of the light?
And what if I wasn't the rescuer of the light?
I was holding a space for the light.
I was holding a space for the light.
Knowing the light is always moving towards the right hands.
Knowing the light is moving always toward the right hands.
And always bringing the wrong hands to justice.
And always bringing the wrong hands to justice.
And this is a lifetime.
And this is a lifetime
where ascension occurs.
Where ascension occurs.
Where love dawns.
Where love dawns.
And darkness is taught its final lesson.
Darkness is taught its final lesson.
And what if all I need to do
And what if all I need to do
is know that?
Is know that. And then I heard, and then nothing matters.
To who does it matter? That's a good answer. To who does it not matter? Who said that? Where's that coming from? Is that coming from your higher self, or is that coming from the ego? Just feel into it.
I feel like it's coming from higher.
Okay. Would higher say that nothing matters?
Well, I think what's meant is that the pretext and the context and all of the baggage doesn't really matter because it's not
Oh, good.
really laying on my shoulders alone. And
Right.
that's just ego speaking if it feels that
Good.
way.
Well, I love that. I love that pretext to have that confirmation. So try this out loud. I don't need to work so hard.
I don't need to work so hard.
This isn't my responsibility.
This isn't my responsibility.
I don't have a debt to pay back.
I don't have a debt to pay back.
I'm simply anchoring the light.
I am simply anchoring the light.
And the easiest way to anchor the light
And the easiest way to anchor the light
is to say, may all of those who oppose the light
is to say, may all of those who oppose the light
be forgiven.
Be forgiven.
Because when I forgive the darkness,
because when I forgive the darkness,
darkness is sent to the light.
Darkness is sent to the light.
And in the
Every
beginning,
time.
and in the beginning of that,
And in the beginning of that,
returning to the light
returning to the light
is darkness's hell.
Is darkness's hell.
Because that's how it's redeemed.
Because that is how it is redeemed.
And as it's redeemed,
And as it's redeemed,
darkness remembers it's the light
darkness remembers it's the light
and reincarnates as a light being.
and reincarnates as a light being.
So if I want to bring justice to this world,
So if I want to bring justice to this world,
I allow darkness to be forgiven.
I allow darkness to be forgiven.
And in the name of fairness,
And in the name of fairness,
we all deserve to be awakened, reborn, and redeemed.
we all deserve to be awakened, reborn, and redeemed.
So that no one else has to be harmed.
So that no one else has to be harmed.
How does that feel?
It feels amazing.
Yeah, that's what I do all day. I forgive. I forgive beings. Hey, best of luck to you when you go to the light. Forgiven. Right? Because that's the radical work.
Yeah.
Not I forgive, and forgiveness doesn't mean it's okay, it happened. No, it means I need to make sure no one's hurt anymore. So I need to rush darkness to the front of the line to be healed and redeemed so that the world can be safe. Forgiveness is the most radical force in existence. It's just people sense the healing power of forgiveness and make it about reward and punishment. Oh, they haven't earned the right to be forgiven. Oh, I think their monstrous actions are showing us exactly who needs to be forgiven, right? Forgiveness, you walk through a room, who needs to be forgiven? Who's making the loudest damn noises? Who's making the noises? Who's creating the most amount of pain? That's someone begging to be forgiven. And they go directly to the light. And then you are a spiritual badass. And then we don't have to hold it. We are just walking around. You see some crazy story in the news, may that be forgiven, right? Forgiveness for the victim to bring them into more of their life purpose. Forgiveness for the predator. And we stop hoarding the light like a special interest group, right? We don't like when it happens politically, so we shouldn't do it spiritually. High vibration is not a special interest group anymore. And if we want to be light beings, we have to bring the light to where the light needs to go, right? It's like, oh, I want to donate my time at a soup kitchen. Oh, but it's in a bad part of town. Well, that's where the hungry people are. So what are we going to do? Surround yourself in light and go there and do what you got to do. So forgiveness is a radical process that we are rushing people to the front of the line so that the world can be a lot safer for all beings. And that's why we've been hurt. So we know how painful, how unfortunate it is, and that no one deserves to be hurt any further. And we have been hurt so that we can know the potency and power of our own forgiveness and how it will rid this planet of chaos, greed, and destruction. And so that's when spirituality for me becomes real. How's that feel?
light as heck.
Yeah. Well, good for you, and congratulations.
Effervescent.
Yeah. And thank you for being such a bright light. And thank you for this opportunity to connect as we are right now. It's an honor to serve you.
It's an honor to speak with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, John, also for picking me.
Of course, thank you for being on, and what a gift you gave all of us by being present
Yeah.
and speaking from that shadow place and letting it.
Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. Matt, how
Yeah.
did you contend, or how do you contend with that darkness inside of you?
It's a great question. For me, a lot of my darkness from my family were in addictive patterns. So throughout my life, in various ways, I've had to look at addictive patterning. And in my family, when we would celebrate an achievement, that's when we all went out to eat or had sugar or whatever it was. And my dad was a functional alcoholic and my mom was codependent. I had that perfect setup. And so at a certain point in my life, I had to kind of look at just addictive patterns, and I had to look at, why do I do what I do? And even if it was like, oh, you go out and you do this every once in a while, but I would just kind of watch. And I've always watched myself, and I always watch people. Like, I've just been that way my whole life. And I've always just kind of watched, like, why am I doing this, and why do I want it? And what I would really watch was, I would watch the stories I would tell myself. So as a perfect description, this is a story from my life many years ago, because my life's very different now. My wife and I went to Disneyland, had no sugar whatsoever. That was fun, by the way. That was super easy to do. It's not easy for ideas, but so I remember many years ago, I just started working as a spiritual teacher, and I'm doing sessions, and I have some interviews. And at the end of the day, I'm like, oh my God, I did 3 sessions and I did an interview, and oh, I need to blow off some steam after the day I've had, And I started to realize that, okay, I have still a very subtle coping mechanism. Now, 2 things struck me about my coping mechanisms. One is, I was saying to the universe, I need to be overwhelmed by the schedule I asked for so that I have a need to blow off steam later that night. I was telling the universe, please don't bring me any more success because I can't handle it. Right. And I'm also saying, I need to be kind of the weakest version of myself so that at the end of the day, I have this big, righteous badge of honor. Matt Kahn earned a treat, whether it's whatever it was. And I realized that I was manifesting one of the weakest versions of myself just so I could have the treat at the end of the day. That if I really was my strongest version of myself, I wouldn't need or want the treat at the end of the day. So I had to really kind of ask myself, am I going to maintain this pattern in exchange for not being the highest version of myself? Or can I see that the crutch and the coping has to go so I can actually step into my highest version of myself? And once I did that, I started to be able to do incredible amounts of interviews, teach all day at retreats, and I would be recharged by the end of the day. Like, I can lead a retreat, and at the end of the 3 days, I can literally go do it again without even blinking.
Yeah.
So it was this very interesting journey of watching myself and really questioning, not in a judgmental way, but why do I do the things that I do? Why do I need something at the end of my day to blow off steam? Why do I need a crutch? And is that thing keeping me from being a higher version of myself? And so I started to kind of see that. And so over many years, in many percentages, I've worked through my family's patterns of addiction. And I now exist as a very different version of myself. And the things that used to be attractive to my family don't really mean that much to me. And so I go to a family party and I'm drinking a bottle of water, or I'm drinking a cup of tea, and they're all doing what they're going to do, which is their journey. And I don't have a judgment about it. It's just not something I'm roped into. And at a certain point, when you're awake, things that dilute your experience, like some people need to drink to relax themselves enough to feel loose. At a certain point of being awake, toxins don't feel good in your body. Like you're socially poisoning yourself. And at a certain point, this doesn't feel good. And then there's a point where it doesn't feel good, but you think you still have to do it. So there's all these levels to wake up out of. But I think there's a difference between I'm not doing toxins because my new poison is ultra healthy, which is another spiritual trap, right?
Mhm.
I'm not doing toxins because I'm doing celery juice and eating blueberries or whatever the hell it is. That's another trap. The reality is, okay, if I want to be my highest self, I shouldn't need constant crutches and I shouldn't need numbing devices. And that's when the journey gets really real, because there's one thing when it's like, yeah, spend some time in the light, spend some time in the shadow, balance it out a little bit. I did 3 days of oming, let's go to Vegas for a few days. But at a certain point, you don't need a break from the light. You don't need to dilute your consciousness. You don't need to constantly have these state changes. You actually are just okay being yourself. And when it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel good. And that's okay. Like, I always feel pretty good. Some days, like I'm going through something, someone calls me, hey, how you doing? Right now, not so awesome. It's fine. It's totally fine. Not because I say it's fine. I'm not, just like, it's just life. And at a certain point, we stop micromanaging ourselves. We stop needing to control our state. We stop diluting ourselves. And it really comes down to really being aware of the stories we tell ourselves. And I saw it with my parents when I was younger, but it took me so many years to figure it out. Like, my parents hated going to restaurants and feeling mistreated by the servers, but they would manifest being mistreated by the servers so they had all these stories to tell their friends. And I watched them create their own reality before I even knew what manifestation even was. And I started to realize part of manifestation is you attract the outcome based on the story you're most likely to tell. And I realized that, and I went, oh my God, I am asking to be totally busy by the universe. I'm asking for this busy schedule so I can serve people. And then I'm asking to subconsciously be not the most powerful me so that I have room to cope with these patterns that I inherited from my family. And once I woke up out of that, and I will tell you that I woke up out of that for real within the last 3 years, just to be totally honest. And I'm proud of that. And I'm not like, oh, it took me all this time. Yeah, it does. It takes everyone all this time. And you think you can ace it in the first 90 days. No, it takes time. I've done this work. I've been on this path as a teacher for 18 years. And in the last 3 years, I've done the most radical work of my entire life, because it took me all that time to come all this way. And in the last 3 years, I took myself 100% seriously. And that's when everything in my life went from amazing, and no one would know this. Everyone thinks Matt Kahn, blah, 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 right? Honestly, just real talk. The last 3 years, I took myself 100% seriously because there was nowhere else for me to go. Nothing else for me to do but either, hey, here's what's left. And I said, fuck yeah. And of course, there's always more, but you no longer are trying to manage your life. It's just easy. It's liberating. And it's as someone just said, it's the nature of embodiment. And I didn't want to leave this planet without taking myself 100% seriously. I've done 97, but 100, and it's the safest I've ever been in myself. So,
and you're willing to die to be reborn into that.
Always, every day die.
Yeah. Amazing.
Every day die. Yeah.
One of the greatest things that I appreciate that you said in this whole conversation,
yeah,
and to paraphrase, is that you do go through your flows where everything isn't perfect. That there are down days. It's like it's
right.
not the best day. My
Right.
body could be hurting. I may be tired. It's a mood can have arisen, but there you are. But you're in a deeper awareness of
Right.
of the flow that's running it, rather than being in the narration that can possibly come through as you create new stories around that.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, John. I'm 47 now, right? And we're all at different ages. When you start turning a certain age, like you can hurt yourself doing literally nothing. Like someone called me, they go, "How you doing?" "Oh, my back. What happened?" "I think I slept wrong." You get to an age where you can sleep wrong. Like it's one thing when you hurt yourself, like lifting something.
Yeah.
I hurt myself doing nothing, right? That's impressive. So like,
Like a Seinfeld episode. Yeah.
right. And there are just days, but like, and what's interesting is like, even when things aren't awesome, they're not so awesome. Like they're not so unawesome that like you're suffering. And what's even more fascinating is that things don't become so amazing anymore that it like everything is just this beautiful sacred dance. It's amazing, but it's not so amazing that things that are not awesome suck. Like it just, everything kind of evens out. And our egos are scared of this. That's why we love our egos, because we are like the parents that are saying, "Honey, this is going to be a little scary, but I'm going to love you through this. It's okay." So we really love ourselves because where we're going is not for all parts of us.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because this is a part of growth. We don't have to get the ego to be okay with what's happening, right? Children don't have to consent to puberty. It's just what's happening. So we love ourselves, and we love ourselves for real, because life is humbling. Life is beautiful. And when we enter reality, that's when we start living. And it's so gorgeous.
Amen to
Yeah.
to that. Oh my God, y'all. Matt, congratulations on your wedding, on your
Thank
marriage.
you.
What can we promote for you today, other than the blessings for your marriage? There's a documentary you have had out.
Yeah, there's a documentary we made, and we're releasing it for free. It's a documentary of me working with people in sessions, which we never really documented. And we sent out to do this documentary, and rather than it be a documentary about the subject of healing, it's a documentary that heals you as you watch it. It's free. So if you go to mattkahn.org, mattkahn.org, and you sign up for our, mailing list, we send you a link to this documentary for free. We put out a Sunday newsletter of free teachings, and, tells you about upcoming events that are going on. But, really, it's just a way for us all to be connected and continue to build this global community of heart-centered beings. And it's interesting, and I'm sure you're seeing this. I'm seeing a very clear path of how the world's going to awaken. And here's what I'll say, just I know we're getting to the end of this. In order for healing to go to mass consciousness, it's got to slip out of the grip of the spiritual counterculture. So right now, there are spiritual people that go, "Yeah, when's the rest of the world going to wake up?" But spiritual people are being equally challenged. Spiritual people have to go from spiritual counterculture. They have to go from the parking lot of Disneyland into reality. And there's going to be a lot of people going through healings and awakenings that aren't going to necessarily want to go through the spiritual counterculture. And so what I'm noticing is the people that are really attached to the counterculture of spirituality, it's getting to be like this kind of burnout energy. And there are people who are really spiritually driven beings who are really going into high level awakenings and healings. And we have to wake up out of the persona. Like real spirituality is embodied ethical action. Being a nice person, and a lot of us, I'm sure you've had the experience, John, I have, go to a spiritual event, not always nice people. So, hey, yeah. The hilarious thing is, the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life is going to a spiritual event. First, I'm no one. Then they realize I'm Matt Kahn and watch the about face. It's the silliest thing I've ever seen in my life, right? Isn't this all, aren't we all the divine? Aren't we all included? I mean, it's either one way or it isn't. So I think what we're going to notice is that healing and awakening and embodiment is going to become such a necessity for the world that it bypasses spiritual counterculture. And spiritual counterculture is going to be challenged to not just wake up, but to grow up into embodiment. So for the people that think they're already there, God bless you. There is such a journey ahead for all of us, but it's making this available for all beings.
Beautiful. I love that call out and that awareness and the preparedness for that, y'all.
Yes.
And really take that to heart and in our humility, ask ourselves how we can be of service to that for ourselves. And when we do it for ourselves, we can't help but to do it for others.
Yes. The new ashram is the farmer's market. I'll say that.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
I'm kidding.
Matt, you're funny. Thank you so much for the conversation, say for the amazing insights, for this amazing process that you took us through. And from sharing from your personal experience and the depth of your heart. It's always wonderful to be with you.
Thank you. I love you all.
Blessings and marriage. I love you all. Thank you for being on the call. Have a fantastic evening.